Two heart-wrenching stories about murder victims have triggered the public's activism on Korea's controversial legal practices. A 21-year-old part-time worker in an internet cafe was brutally stabbed to death by a customer of the cafe who thought to have been mistreated. What infuriated the public was the murderer's attempt to ask for mitigated punishment based on his mental illness. In Korea, there have been cases where the perpetrators of heinous crimes ended up being given lenient sentences due to mental disorders or impaired judgment. Also, the murder case of a woman by her ex-husband has also triggered public outrage. According to a story revealed by one of the victim's daughters, the man had committed severe acts of domestic violence against his wife and daughters all throughout his marriage life. Even after the divorce, he followed around his ex-wife, threatening to kill her, which he eventually carried out. His daughter posted an article in the presidential office's petition board asking for the capital punishment for her father. The murderer often proclaimed that he would never receive severe punishment because he has a history of mental illness. Infuriated by the criminals who try to take advantage of the loophole of the law and get away with murder, the Korean public is now asking for very strict application of the clause that allows leniency for criminals with mental illness history. Also, the two murder cases re-triggered a debate about capital punishment. Korea is currently an abolitionist country in practice that sentences people to death, but does not carry out the punishment. Proponents of the death penalty say that the repeated occurrences of inhumane and horrific murder cases are due to the lack of the death penalty, which would serve as a deterrent of these sorts of crimes. The number of petitioners who are against the leniency for criminals with mental illness history has well passed 1 million, which is the highest since the presidential office opened its petition board. Koreans now are more aware of the legal system, and they want the punishment to fit the crime. Despite the fact that some criminals have a history of mental illness, many Koreans think that they should not be exempt from the law if they commit violent crimes. So they should not be exempt from the law, meaning that everyone under the law should be treated fairly, even if they have a mental illness or not. So if you're exempt means it doesn't pertain to you or doesn't apply to you if you report that you are criminally insane. Many Koreans think the mentally ill should receive the same punishment as regular violent criminals. So we've said a lot of things here, people that are mentally ill, and mentally ill can mean a lot of things. It can mean depressed, schizophrenic, people who have delusions or see or hear things. It kind of includes a lot of things. And we also use the term insane, kind of another word for very crazy. So as we define mentally ill, it's a huge category of people with mental problems. Technicalities in the law need to be fixed so that criminals cannot use mental illness as an excuse for easier time. So I said technicalities in the law need to be fixed. Technicalities are kind of small, maybe administrative things that people use to beat a process. For example, if you get arrested in America and the officer writes your name down, and if he misspells it by one letter incorrectly, you will not be convicted of the crime. That is a technicality. It's something so small that is in the process that can get you off the case. Or if they write down the address of where the crime happened, if they write it incorrectly, the case is thrown out. That is called a technicality. So if you can beat something by a technicality, it means you've used the system to your advantage for something very small. Also, we call these kind of loopholes as well. And I said, so it can't be fixed, so criminals cannot use mental illness as an excuse for easier time. So if you kill someone, you're going to jail, you're going to serve what we call hard time. You're going to a prison for violent criminals. You'll be put in a cell, maybe isolated for 23 hours a day. You'll have to work. That is what we call hard time. But if you plead you say that you are mentally ill, you will go to a hospital prison. And that time is much easier than going to a maximum security prison. So if people commit crimes, they say, oh, I'm mentally ill. They understand that going to a hospital prison, the time you'll do there is much easier. The conditions are better. The food is better. And it's less restrictive. So we call that easy time. The current legal system needs to be revised so it would be harder for criminals to plead insanity. So when people get arrested and they'll use mental illness as an excuse, they say that we'll plead insanity or plead insane. Insane means like very, very crazy or mentally unstable. So if you are found that you are insane, you do not go to a regular prison. You go to kind of an insane hospital or insane asylum prison to serve your time. The death penalty should be used as a deterrent. If criminals are aware of the death penalty, they will think twice before committing crimes. So I said the death penalty should be used as a deterrent. Deterrent is something that prevents you from doing something. So for example, if you see a speed camera on the highway, that will deter you from speeding. You'll slow down. So those cameras are used as deterrents. And I said that the criminals will think twice before committing crimes. So when we use the expression to think twice, it means that if someone's going to do something bad or dangerous or risky, you should think twice. So you've thought about it once, take a second, think twice. So if people are thinking twice, that means they may not do the bad or risky behavior that they are thinking about doing. So we even use it sometimes when we give advice, so we're like, hey, think twice before you invest in the stock market. That means you've really got to think about what you're doing, and you should think about it again. Like don't kind of just go do it. Always think twice. It's a little bit of a warning. Violent crimes would be reduced if the death penalty is enforced. There is no hard evidence that the death penalty reduces violent crime. Korea should keep its current policy and get rid of the death penalty. So I mentioned there is no hard evidence. So hard evidence is very similar to proof. We can use evidence if, for example, there's a crime and somebody steals something. There's CCTV footage of someone actually stealing something. That is evidence. But we can also use evidence, or hard evidence means like very clear proof or evidence. We can use it for academic studies. Like you can say that there's hard evidence that eating less sugar is healthy for you. So all the studies have done, sugar is very bad for you. There's a lot of hard evidence or a lot of data that shows that sugar is harmful. So we can use it both for criminal or even academic studies. Korea needs to change its laws and get rid of the death penalty. It has not been shown that executing criminals reduces violent crime. The murder of the woman could have been averted if the reports of domestic violence were addressed earlier. If perpetrators of domestic violence are identified and prosecuted, it can prevent future acts of violence. So I said the murder of the woman could have been averted. Averted is like prevented, or it's like to avert means to change direction. So it could have been averted. It could have been stopped. And we talk about domestic violence. So we've got a couple definitions. So domestic means anything that involves in the home. So we have domestic disputes. So if you and your wife or husband are arguing, that is what we call it, or family are arguing loudly, that is a domestic dispute. The police could be called and they'll tell you to be quiet. But anytime you hit somebody or hurt somebody, that is domestic violence. So that's a little bit the difference between two. So there's domestic disputes, domestic violence. So we always use domestic having anything to do with inside someone's home. Law enforcement needs to crack down harder on domestic violence reports. If these cases are ignored, more innocent people will die as a result. So I said law enforcement needs to crack down harder. When there's a crackdown, it means the police or, for example, a boss, they're going to go after something that's going, that's illegal or something they don't want to happen. So for example, if you're working in an office everybody's using the internet, doing internet shopping, and the boss finds out, he's going to start cracking down, means he'll start punishing more people who are doing internet shopping at work. Same works for a law. So, now that this case of domestic violence was ignored, there may be a crackdown by police, meaning, so if there's a domestic violence call, more officers will start arresting more people. So we call that a crackdown when a law or a rule is being enforced and punished. Thanks, guys. Thanks for downloading. Bye-bye.